I love finding out something is named after a person I've never heard of. Like I thought the word was Latin and it turns out there was just a guy named John Pants. So here are 10 things you might not know are named after people. This segment has always been called 10 things. Pilates, the woo-woo exercise fad, was named after Joe Pilates. I mean, he was German, so his name was like Joseph Hubertus Pilates, but still, guys were named after Guy Fawkes. Guy was a boy's name before it was a general term, and then Guy Fawkes got extremely famous for something that he almost did. And then eventually they started calling anybody who dressed badly a guy. And then because that's most of us, it became a general term for guys. Fettuccine Alfredo was invented by a chef who came up with the idea for his pregnant wife, which makes sense because even a couple bites of that dish tastes like I'm eating for two. Bib lettuce does look like a little bib, but it was actually named after its inventor, John Bibb. Bing cherries were named after Mr. Bing. Boysenberries were named after Mr. Boysen. And a lot of people claim to have invented the margarita, but they always say they named it after a little Margaret. It's always a margarita, we just don't know which one. Cristiano Ronaldo was named after Ronald Reagan. And that tracks. I joked about John Pants and that's not real, but they are named after a person, just not a real person. There was a character in old Commedia dell'arte named Pantaloon, and instead of the normal trousers that have the two legs separate, his met in the middle at the top. And so that style of trouser became known as a pantaloon and then pants. And my favorite one, Apple Computers, named after the fruit, obviously named their main line of computers after the Macintosh Apple. And those were named after their discoverer, so the Apple Macintosh is named after John Macintosh. I love finding out something is named after a person that I've never heard of, like how Pilates is not a science word, it's just named after Joe Pilates. So here are 6 more things that you might not have known were named after people. This segment has always been called 6 things. Bluetooth is named after a 10th century Danish king. King Harold Bluetooth had one tooth that was so rotten that it turned blue, and we honor him every day by using low-powered radios to make headphones way more expensive than they used to be. The G-spot is named after Ernst Grafenberg, the first person to discover it, in the Columbus discovered America sense of the word. If we were to name it after the first person who actually found it, I assume that would be Eve. But Ernie did invent the IUD, so at least he did something useful while he was down there. Sideburns are named after Ambrose Burnside, a Civil War general who earned it. My favorite subgenre of this is when it sounds like it's named after a place, but is still actually named after a person. Like the French drain is not named after the country, it's named after Henry French. And German chocolate cake is the same way. It's not named after the place, it's named after an American named Sam German. And the crazy thing is when Sam came up with that recipe, he was working for Walter Baker, whose company sold chocolate that, yes, is for baking, but Baker's chocolate is named after Walt. These are called eponyms, which just comes from the Greek word for names, and that sucks. It should have a cooler name. Like, they should be named after the first person who discovered them, Ernst Grafenberg. Even if he didn't discover them, I'm going to call them G names because of all his hard work on IUDs. Recently, I've gone down a rabbit hole of who stuff is named after, so this is the third in my series of videos about eponyms, which are named after John Eponym, probably. So here are 5 more you may not know. This series has always been called 5 things. Burpees definitely sound like they were named after the sound you make while you're doing them, but they were actually named after a physiologist named Royal H. Burpee. And while his name sounds fun, his exercises are not. Diesel fuel and diesel engines are both named after the inventor Rudolf Diesel, which means that Vin Diesel is also named after Rudy. Or at least his stage name is. His real name is not Vincenzo Diesel, it's Mark. He's actually named after thousands of years of dudes named Mark. Caesar salad is named after a guy, but not that one. Not the guy who's known for pointing vaguely off in that direction and getting stabbed. It was named after an Italian chef living in Mexico who loved Worcestershire sauce. And of course, America herself is named after Amerigo Vespucci. And you'd think one country, 2 continents, he must have been an amazing guy. That's not how we do names. Pucci was an okay explorer who took 4 trips according to him and 2 according to historians. He greatly exaggerated his roles in the ones he did take, and he was almost constantly lost, meaning the United States is named after an aquatic con man. Probably the funniest one is boycotting, which is not named after boys in cots, it's named after Charles Boycott, because he sucked. He was an Irish rent collector, and he was so despised that we named the concept of hating somebody and not wanting to give them money after him. That's amazing. So in his honor, I'm not going to watch any of Mark Diesel's movies, eat any salad with fish sauce, or do burpees. I love learning about the weird people that stuff is named after. They're called eponyms, probably after John Eponym. And here's another list of 7 things you might not know were named after people. This segment has always been called 7 things. Salmonella doesn't come from salmon. It's named after Danny Salmon, pictured here looking like he just did something naughty. The entire concept of being mesmerized is named after a guy named Franz Mesmer. He was a quack doctor who cured hysteria in women using magnets. 2 bonus facts about Franz. Number 1, he knew Mozart. And 2, he once got in a huge fight because he claimed that exorcisms weren't real. They were just just using their animal magnetism to get rid of the demon, and I just love that there's a fight between two guys over which of their magics got rid of the fake demon. The process of dividing states in weird ways to cheat at elections is called gerrymandering, and that is half named after Elbridge Gerry. The other half is named after a salamander, pictured here looking like he just did something naughty. This is an important one for safety. The children's python is named after John Children, not because it's a fun snake for kids. I already mentioned the Grafenberg spot, but there's a lot of other parts of women's bodies that are named after dudes. Gabrielle Fallopia sounds made up, but that was a real 16th century priest who got his name on some tubes. Caspar Bartholin the Younger and Alexander Skene both got their names on some glands. And for any guys who feel left out, you can't spell hymen without men. That may sound chauvinistic, a term that comes from a character in a French play named Nicolas Chauvin. And if that makes you mad enough to want to guillotine somebody, that was named after Joe Guillotine, who doesn't look like he did anything naughty, but he did. I love learning about the weird people that stuff is named after, and every time I think I've run out of eponyms, you guys suggest a bunch more to research. So here are another 7 things that you might not have known were named after people. This segment has always been called 7 Things. The reason you're seeing this video is because it was blessed by the algorithm, named after Muhammad al-Khwarizmi, a Persian mathematician so smart that we honor him all the time by mispronouncing the crap out of his name. The little pieces of a bomb that hurt you the most are called shrapnel, named after Lieutenant General Henry Shrapnel. And if you think I seem bad to hang out with, imagine the kind of person who is constantly updating a Wikipedia page to make sure you know that shrapnel and fragmentation devices are technically different. I always assumed the old school leg clothes bloomers were named after a blooming flower, but they were actually named after Amelia Bloomer, a badass women's rights advocate who ran a newspaper and had the radical idea that women's clothes should be functional. And I know the 1800s seems pretty late for women's trousers to still be an issue, but remember, society is a late bloomer. And then there's my favorite subgenre of eponyms, which is the fake-out eponym that seems like it's named after a thing, but is secretly named after a person. Parks Highway in Alaska goes to Denali National Park, but is named after George Park. Google's PageRank does rank pages, but it's actually named after Larry Page. Taco Bell has a bell in the logo, but it's named after Glenn Bell. Outer Bridge Crossing between New York and New Jersey is a pretty outer bridge, but it's actually named after Eugenius Outerbridge. And I'm just glad he had a hobby that had to do with his last name and not his first name, Eugenius. I think this is my last video about eponyms, but it's hard to tell because it really seems like the al-Khwarizmi likes them.